Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Public Works Committee will come to order. We have a short agenda this evening. We have the consent agenda, and we have one item on the general agenda, consideration of a proposal to make a revision to the traffic calming policy. First, are there any of the consent agenda items need to be removed for discussion? Yes.
C2A.
C2A.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the balance.
Second.
All right. Discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That is approved, except for item C2A, if we'll have that for consideration, please.
Resolution authorizing the removal of the Kennard Drive sidewalk project from the City Council approved bond sidewalk list.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery.
Yes, it's a question, maybe both staff and a legal question in reference to the Kennard Drive sidewalk project. Met with the neighbors in reference to this, and it was one that was part of the approved bond projects. But what the neighborhood desires is, one, they not necessarily wanting the sidewalks, but there are some other issues in the neighborhood, particularly some stormwater issues. And one of the questions that I have is whether or not the dollars that were allocated specifically to the sidewalk project could be reallocated in assisting with any of the stormwater issues that are there, or whether or not the dollars are restricted to only being used for the sidewalk project because of the bond. And that was a question that I told the community I would come back and pose in some fashion. May not be something that we have to have today to do it, but I do want to make that as that's very much a desire of the neighborhood, more so because it affects many of the property owners on Kennard Drive, and that would, in their minds, they would rather that issue be dealt with than new sidewalks.
Right. The bond categories were specific about what activities could be done. There's a category that these projects were approved under called transportation. So we'll just have to go back and look and see whether it's broad enough written that it would allow any kind of stormwater activity as part of a otherwise transportation project. I think transportation still has to be the focus of any project done with these funds, but we'll go back and check with the attorney's office about, and the city's finance department and the bond attorney about specifically what would be allowed.
It's in the streets and sidewalks category, which is defined in under state law on the ballot. And my understanding is it has to be something related to the right-of-way or adjacent to that right-of-way. So we'll have to see whether the stormwater, because I know it's behind the houses from Brushy Fork that causes all the flooding.
Do you want to hold this item, Mr. Montgomery, until we get that answer?
Well, one question said when we remove this, those allocated funds just go back to being unapplied within the categories they were already in, correct?
That is correct, and within the area that they're designated for as well.
No, so we can, I move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Not those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to the general agenda item, please.
Item G1, consideration of a resolution approving a revised traffic calming policy for the use of vertical displacement devices.
Okay, we have Mr. Turner and Ms. McCullough, if you'd care to step forward and join us for discussion. This is pretty straightforward. We've had extended discussions for several meetings on our traffic calming policy. Generally, we made a number of amendments over the several years since we initially proposed and adopted a traffic calming policy. This is one specific revision that is coming forward essentially at my request as a proposed compromise way in which to address the continuing tension over when a vertical displacement or speed humps and lumps option is appropriately considered. And in essence, this selects a time delay figure and holds it as a new additional restriction on when it's appropriate to use the cushions or the humps. The 60 seconds was selected again at my suggestion after staff reported that there was no industry standard involved here. And it is, in essence, a proposed compromise between the position that speed cushions and humps are a cost-effective means of slowing traffic in some situations versus the public safety perspective that effect comes at an undesirable or unacceptable cost in emergency response delay. In particular, the fire departments especially dislike the vertical displacement devices because it does slow their vehicles down, and it's essentially impossible for the police or emergency medical vehicles to avoid them, and as a practical matter, the fire departments report that even when they are designed as the cushions with gaps, that it is often impossible for them to actually hit the gaps because of parking along the street or oncoming vehicles. So the reason the 60 seconds was selected, or the reason I proposed, 60 seconds, is that one, on average, the delay by a hump or cushion is 10 seconds per for vehicles, and the fire folks report that the doubling time for a structure fire is a minute. So if you have until it reaches the constraints of the structure, the goal of the fire department is to reach the scene within 4 minutes, and having any particular location where you're adding more than a minute to the time it takes the fire response vehicles to reach because of publicly created by design delays is going to be a measurable adverse impact on the response of both the fire and, I am told, the percentage survivability of a cardiac arrest type incident. So that's the proposal, and that's my pitch for it, and I open the floor to comments or questions.
I had an opportunity to read the guidelines that were prepared, I guess the standards that were prepared 7 years ago. And it strikes me that there's a fairly careful and deliberate process in responding to citizens' requests for speed control dampening devices. It involves public hearings, it involves traffic counts, it involves surveys of the site, it involves discussions with the elected body. It's pretty heavily vetted, and part of the components of that is, of course, a menu of options that exist for selection to deal with specific conditions that exist in any given location, along with the authority of each council member to, in fact, veto certain components, I suppose, that exist within that plan. It appears to me to be a risk management question. Is the risk of someone being harmed in the street because of speeding cars, children, dogs, animals, other vehicles, a greater risk than the risk of a multi-minute delay, perhaps, in getting an emergency response vehicle in place? And in the public comment period in the review that occurs within the neighborhoods that I've observed, that risk is articulated to the residents, and they understand that these things pose, that there's a risk balance that occurs when you choose to put in speed bumps to first responders. And sometimes people appreciate that, and it turns the opinions around. Other times neighborhoods seem to be willing to incur that risk, and that seems to be a choice that they make. That choice of one of the tools in the toolbox is one of the options that they have in the deliberations, and this council, of course, then gets to rule on that as a final determinant. I think that mechanism provides good public input. I think that mechanism provides for the neighbors and the people most affected the ability to influence their well-being. And I think that they appreciate the risks that they're taking. I would be a little reluctant to take that tool entirely out of the toolbox. The issue that I have with this proposal is that, as you know, if the 60-second rule is applied, then that means no more that a emergency vehicle cannot go over more than 6 speed bumps to any location. And that's going to be, that logistically, as we look at how neighborhoods control traffic and how conditions change, how traffic patterns change, to traffic bumps or controlling devices that are put in 10 years ago, then set the tone for what might be done elsewhere in the city or at other times. I wish there were a way also to remove speed bumps. I don't think anybody likes them. I don't enjoy driving over them, but they do slow me down. And I think that's a risk that the neighbors who request them are willing to endure that option. I fear that this council may on occasion look solely at the cost effectiveness of the solutions. And I hope that's certainly not the case. I don't have the experience yet to know that entirely. But the other options seem to be more expensive from what I can tell, and I can see how that would be a possible deterrent. But I do think that the option to do this is a choice that the neighbors can make, and if they make that, we should probably respect it.
Mr. Montgomery.
Yep. In the process, I've had many neighborhoods, particularly out in the southern part of southern part, yeah, southeastern part of my ward that have used many of the traffic calming measures, particularly when it comes to speed humps. And I do share Councilmember Bessie's concern in reference to what that does and the impact of our public safety ability to get to neighborhoods and deal with issues that arise within the neighborhood. And I have taken the stance that if the neighborhood requests a certain style of traffic calming measures, then I normally support the neighborhood's position on that within the framework of the policy. But if there was a policy in place that stated that a certain measure could not be used if, as determined by council, had an adverse impact on public safety's ability to reach a particular area, then it would, in that sense, restrict what options are available to the neighborhood based upon that, and then other methods likely would begin to rise to the top. And one of the challenges I think we have in the community, I think Mr. Bessie has mentioned it quite often, is we are most familiar with speed humps, and thus, because we're most familiar with speed humps as a traffic calming measure, it is something that neighbors are most comfortable with oftentimes than even given the opportunity to really try out what other methods are and the impact that they have in still achieving the same goal, which is to slow traffic down. And I say all that to say that I'm supportive of being able to add a place where we're giving public safety the opportunity to step in, because at the end of the day, both sides is about public safety. Slowing people down in neighborhoods about public safety, and then making sure that we use the right tool to make sure that our public safety personnel are able to reach the communities when they're called is about public safety as well. So it's being able to hold in balance the tension between the two of those. And the only piece that I would ask potentially for to have another thought on is just basically looking on some of the places where we have used speed humps, what neighborhoods would have been impacted by if we use this metric on that, in terms of kind of looking at it. If this was in place, you know, within the last 3 years and what we've looked at, yeah, would those neighborhoods qualify, to be able to get a real sense of, you know, what that does. But then that doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be used just because some of those out. It just may have meant that in those neighborhoods there would have been a different type of traffic calming measure used. But I think it'd be good just to reflect and see. But in principle, I think that it's a good opportunity in a meeting of the middle in terms of giving a specific time gives an impact in terms of what that impact has on neighbors and community, that I think holds in tension those two concerns on public safety issues.
Any comments, Mr. Bell?
I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, I certainly thank you for bringing this forward. We've had much discussion at the council level about vertical devices, and I've always said, well, we're going to support them as long as they're an option. Traffic calming is something that's very important to a lot of neighborhoods and communities. As we have meetings, we hear it on a regular basis. This doesn't necessarily eliminate the option of a vertical device. It just allows the council to have just a little bit of discretion when it comes to how we look at emergency response times in neighborhoods and communities. Again, this is a compromise. I think this is what government is all about. Sure, if you want vertical devices, we can still look at those. I like the idea of the council moving toward other traffic calming measures, but it doesn't take the tool out of the toolbox. It just gives us other options to protect neighborhoods and communities. And as Councilmember Montgomery mentioned, just to sort of look at public safety from both angles, from our emergency responders and from the community. And this is a compromise on how to do both. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Could I ask,
Mr. Larson?
do we have a mapping? Do we have any idea of where we currently have more than 6 in lined up in neighborhoods? Do we know where, if we impose this policy at point, obviously it'll be grandfathered, but where is the most traffic calming devices right now, and how are they employed?
I don't have that information in front of me. I know that on Oak Ridge we have quite a few on that road, and I could get a map. I can prepare a map to actually show you where they are and the number that we have in particular areas.
Now, where those traffic calming devices exist, it means probably nobody around there is going to be able to use the 6 that are being proposed. So to follow up on other thoughts, immediately that removes that option for those people, for adjacent neighborhoods. And I think we need to be clear about where that is, just so we understand what we're doing to adjacent neighborhoods. Do we have any applications currently in place for traffic calming that is actively considering humps or bumps or whatever? Do we have ones that are in the tube right now that people are looking toward that?
Yes, we actually have, I think, at least 3 that are currently being considered. And the neighborhoods are actually voting on speed cushions as an option.
And how many are they asking for? So how many is it 6 a reasonable number for application in any given case, or is that going to be not going to really solve anybody's problem?
I can't tell you specifically for each of those that are currently occurring. I know that maybe there was one that there may be only 2 or 3 on that roadway. So 6 could be a number depending on the length of the road that we could approach rather easily. But to give you that information right now today, I don't have that.
That 6 would be a workable number for most applications, as long as it didn't bank up against a previous 6 in roadway approaches.
So there's the potential where you have a neighborhood that currently has speed cushions, and they may have less than 6. So then now they request traffic calming in that neighborhood, and if they're requesting speed cushions, then yes, there would be that potential that we would not be able to recommend it going forward.
I have 2 other hands up. One thing I wanted to note is that my thought is to do 2 things. One is to provide a consistent standard that then council members can respond to neighborhoods saying, you know, I support having this as an option within the policy, but we have made a a citywide determination that to protect the public safety in terms of facilitating the timely response of emergency vehicles, we're not going to approve new projects which would result in longer than an additional minute delay on fire, ambulance, and police. And this is a response that I have consistently gotten in past cases where I have recommended against, and a council member said, well, I have a hard time telling that neighborhood that I'm going to oppose your request when our policy permits it. And this would add a standard for those requests to be stacked up against. Secondly, it very specifically is intended to permit considerations of safety impact beyond the immediately affected neighborhood by the project. Because if you are going to say to neighborhood over here that their safety is going to be compromised in emergency response vehicles by two projects stacking up against each other in the direction that those fire trucks are going to have to come from, I think that's a very important and real consideration that goes beyond this sub-neighborhood's immediate purview. And I think these folks should get the protection of timely emergency response, even if it restricts the types of traffic calming options that are available to this neighborhood over here. That is further elucidation of my rationale for putting it forward in this process now. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. I just want to say that in the event that we implement this policy change, when we go out and, let's say a neighborhood says, hey, we want 6 devices, vertical devices, I think this committee always has the ability to come back, revisit the policy, and if we find that 7 might be the sweet spot, or 8, and I don't want to keep going on, but we do have the ability to come back and take a look at it. Secondly, I'm sure I know the answer to this, Ms. McCullough, but in the event where 6 may or may not be deemed as adequate by a community, that we have the ability to go out and use sort of a combination of rumble strips or some other sort of traffic calming measure in addition to the vertical devices.
Yes, we do have that option, and we always present to the neighborhood other options that are available to them based upon their roadway conditions. That's always where we start. It's we try to leave it up to the neighborhood task force to then determine what their final recommendation wants to be for their neighborhood. But if this is in place, then we would continue to do as we have been doing, and presenting other options, explaining to them that based upon the policy, they would not qualify for speed cushions because of the way the policy is written, and so maybe they need to then consider some of the other options we've presented to them.
Well, and I guess my question is, in the event that we add the policy, right, blanket wide of 6,
Right.
if a community says, okay, 6 may not be adequate, but we'd like the 6, but we'd like to take the 6, spread them out, and use some other form of traffic calming in addition to the 6.
Yes.
We have the ability to do that as well.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Mr. Montgomery.
Well, this is an action item.
It's a potential action item, or we could hold it in committee. Or we could move it with amendments such as an effective date of February 1st or whatever. So it's to avoid the problem of projects that are already well advanced in the process.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is I know want to be conscious of Councilmember Larson's time coming on council and getting acclimated with this particular one, but I know we have spent a lot of time talking through and looking at the policy and potential policy changes and just seeing how we can get something to a place of moving forward, but then even thinking about the questions that have been brought.
So, I mean, it's at the committee's pleasure. We can hold it for another month, get the information back specifically in response to what existing projects are out, what existing traffic calming projects that are already in place are there, what effect this would have had on those had it been in place at the time. It is at the pleasure of the committee.
Yeah, my question in terms of getting that was not, I just wanted that information, but not in terms of impacting where I was on the actual policy itself.
My preference, if the committee is willing to do this, would be to move forward with a delayed effective date to permit any projects that are in the pipeline under existing rules to go forward under existing rules.
I'm sorry I'm catching up on all of this, but it is new for me. Under this scenario, then, by right, 6 devices would be authorized.
It would be an option.
Would be an option. That would still require approval by the council?
Yes, by the neighborhood and by the council.
For implementation. There is no provision for moving off of that. Councilman Taylor made a suggestion, made a comment, the possibility of if the need arise, are we putting in wordage that would say that by right 6 are authorized for consideration, anything more would require special whatever, or I don't see that wordage.
That's not a part of this. I think what Councilmember Taylor was referring to is that we could readjust the policy again.
Or require a whole new revision to the ordinance or whatever.
But as a practical matter, revisions can be undertaken much more rapidly than this has been.
How long will it take the ones that are in the tube right now to come in front of council?
That's a very challenging question. It really depends upon the neighborhood. Some neighborhoods and residents return their votes rather quickly, and others can go on for months. So we can, of course, advise them that there's a policy change coming forward and try to use that as a method to expedite them if you set an effective date.
Any of these abut projects that already have calming devices in them that would influence this 1 minute issue?
Pecan Ridge, I think they currently have speed cushions and humps in the neighborhood, and that's one of the neighborhoods that's currently voting on additional items.
Would exceed, their devices would exceed the 1 minute based on what the neighbors have already done.
I think that there would be some roads that, yes, it would.
Ms. Wheeler?
So that's when Pecan Ridge is one of the neighborhoods in my area. We originally went door to door on the first side of that with neighbors and others to make sure we could get the votes out because we weren't. But I think in terms of things that are in the pipeline, I think one thing is that we just say in terms of moving the process forward is that we know what is already in the pipeline, what has already been submitted, and we can specify that those that are already in process now are not impacted by this process moving forward. And thus the other neighborhoods that already have in place are thus grandfathered into it, and this would then apply to others. And with that said, I'd be ready to put that in the form of a motion if others may be ready.
Mr. Chairman, in light of Mr. Montgomery's comments, I think we need to be specific as to what we mean by in the pipeline. I know there are criteria that if a community wants vertical devices or some traffic calming measure, one of the first criteria is that they have a community meeting. Is that correct? So I would say if we could be that specific to say if they haven't had the initial community meeting to discuss traffic calming measures, then this would certainly apply to them. And those who've already had that initial meeting, who are in the pipeline and moving forward, then this would not apply. So that adds some specificity to the language.
All right. Well, I would certainly take as in order a motion to approve this with the caveat that it only applies to projects that have not reached the initial community meeting level.
So move.
Second, comments.
Comments?
I just want to make my position clear. I've said this before, as long as it's an option, I'm going to support it. I think neighborhoods and communities know what's best, and I don't think I'm smarter than them. If they come to us and say, well, 6 is an inappropriate number for what reason or the other, I am open, and I will be open to bringing this back to committee with the permission of the chairman to reopen the discussion to move the number or adjust the number up or down as needed.
Certainly. Always in order. Other discussion?
I would concur with that if we're allowed to have that discussion. I'm just not clear that the way this is written right now will allow this committee without going back to the full board to make that modification.
it would require approval, assuming this were approved by the full board, then a change would be required by the full board.
It would take a change of the complete ordinance to do that. It would not be a waiver or a special condition or a thing like that, which is, of course, murky ground.
That's correct.
So as long as we're clear
Right.
that that's what it would take at that point.
And if I may, what I've heard from the chairman is that he's willing to bring it back to committee for discussion.
Yes.
And we don't want him to, not that he's ever done it, but get in committee and say, no, we're not going to discuss it. He said he will discuss it. He's always been a man of his word. I don't think we have to worry
We
about
won't
that.
be here, you know.
Or his designee, which could be me.
Call the question.
Right.
If there's no objection to the call for the question, those in favor should indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Recommend unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner, is there anything else to come before the committee this evening?
I think I know the answer to this.
No, as it happens.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery.
I know there have been, in different areas, with the temperatures varying up and down here as we're getting colder. And I know in some areas in my community, there have been lines that have burst. And so I did want to say, one, the city staff has been out on our side when that's happened, you know, saying kudos to them and the good work that's happening. But I know we've seen that in several neighborhoods and others, and I'm not sure if others are seeing the same thing, but with some lines breaking due to the freezing temperatures in a few areas. And one, the good work is going, but we want to make sure we continue to be responsive as that happens.
Certainly.
Very good. And one query, has any formal announcement been made regarding the prospect of a fourth round of leaf collection, given what?
Just now. Was an announcement made just a few seconds ago.
It was in Ask Sam or something. I saw it the other day.
Yeah, it was also in the newspaper. But yes, we are doing a fourth round because of the unusual aspects of this leaf season. So the leaves came down late. We had actually 2 cycles completed before people really had a lot of leaves out at the curb. So with the amount of time left in the season, you know, we normally go through January the 15th. So we anticipate being able to do a fourth round for
can do a
folks
release.
that haven't gotten
All
that.
right, let's do a release, because I had held off. I knew that such a proposal was in the works, but I didn't want to make a premature announcement. Since that's confirmed now, let's do a formal announcement. Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
I want to take a brief moment and thank the manager, the assistant city manager over transportation, and particularly the director of transportation, Ms. McCullough, for the work that you did on the left-hand turn lane into the Morningside community off of MLK to Argonne. This is a particular issue that the community was very concerned about. As I mentioned to the journal, it was a widely discussed topic on social media, and the community sort of felt like that the DOT came in due to the Salem Creek connector and just sort of blocked off their neighborhood, and they sort of felt trapped for whatever reason. They didn't really like it. We sort of organized a couple of meetings with the help of Ms. McCullough, and we were able to provide that left-hand turn lane. And I just want to say, you'd be surprised how, Ms. McCullough, something so simple can make a community feel full of pride and dignity, and with the sentiment that the city and the state actually cares about how they feel. So I just want to say thank you for helping to push that forward. We couldn't have done it without you, and I appreciate all you do for the Southeast Ward and for the greater Winston-Salem community.
Okay. And just to advise committee members, we will begin in January with the next round of discussions of transit finance policy issues, so that we can have recommendations for the council ready by the time the budget process is in full swing, and we're looking at what we need in order to pay for the transit system and where that might come from, because there's a complex interplay of the policies, the fee structure, and the costs of the system, and where we would need to get the costs if we're going to maintain our commitment to the service quality improvements that are in play. Mr. Montgomery?
It seems broad transit reminded me of an item, not directly, but indirectly impacted by that in reference to the changes within the transit system that will take place next year. And one item that has come to my attention, again, in reference to one of the changes, and we'd like the staff to get some opportunities in terms of what can be done, particularly bus stop at East Forsyth. The stop that goes East Forsyth, been made aware, although East Forsyth School and others were made very much aware of the process and public comment period and opportunities to engage with that. There's approximately 30 students that will be inadvertently impacted by the change in which they utilize the bus to get to school and back home from school, and want to see what we can do within the realms of where things are to make adjustments within that, if what it would take to make adjustments within that process, if it's feasible within whatever changes we've made. And I'm not sure if they've reached out to the city staff and they've made contact with us.
I've not heard
Okay.
of that concern. I'll look into it and respond to it.
Okay.
My assumption is that stops can be adjusted more easily than routes. So if there's a question of adding a new stop,
Yes, at this point, since we're 2.5 weeks out, adding a new route would be, prove difficult to get everything programmed
Right.
into the system. But adding a stop, yes, but not sure how we're impacting them. So if you would allow me to just go back and do that research, and I would share with you what that impact could possibly be.
Okay, and I say on the school system side of it, I think it was a lack of them being present and communicating that issue until after the fact. But the fact is that there's 30 children who go to school, and that'd be 30 kids who have to find another way to get to school. And I'm not sure if it's the fact that this bus, in terms of how the bus system is working there with them, particularly the physical bus, but I know that it's directly impacted about 30 kids who use the bus to and from. And so I'm not exactly sure all the parameters around it, but that's what's been communicated from the school and from some other community folks who've been working with those families.
thank you. And just everybody who's, all the multitudes of folks who are watching us on television, keep in mind that the new routes go into effect January 2nd. And we're trying to get the word out. That's just another.
Right. Crews were, I saw
PSI.
crews this weekend putting up the new bus stop signs. They're very different, much more informative with the actual routes.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out the new bus signs, they're great. They tell you what routes are coming through, how to get information about when it's going to next be at that stop, right there on the sign. All right, thank you very much. Then we are
Thank you.
adjourned.
Thank you.